Well, good morning, everybody. Here's a quick layout of what we're going to be covering in this report. We're about to watch the second day of this deep low that moved through the mid part of the country yesterday. You can see it right here on satellite. We're going to watch this translate a bit farther to the east, and with it, the risk of severe storms. After that, we're going to get into the longer-term forecast with primarily just using the European model today. And the big reason for that was I didn't catch this yesterday afternoon. I should have, but NOAA's FTP servers went down, and I didn't make the switch in my code to go back over to their HTTPS, so I missed some of the latest GFS data. And what that means is if you go to agweather.com and you start typing in your location, it's going to have stale data in it from the GFS, and I apologize for that. But what we will be doing after that is we're going to go right back into our longer range discussion about May. We're going to talk about a new analog year this year. I'm going to focus in on one, which would be 2010. And I also want to talk a bit about some great comments I had from you all yesterday about 1992, which was the analog year we looked at yesterday, in Pinatubo. I kind of neglected to talk about it, and I want to make sure that we include that today. So thank you for those comments. They are always appreciated. Now, I kind of left this hanging right here just as the sun was setting last night, because yesterday I just did not, and I should have done better with this, but I did not give much attention to the severe weather threat that was across parts of Virginia and Maryland yesterday. In the early morning when I was preparing this, Storm Prediction Center did have a slight risk out for this area. I was more focused on the very large area in through here of enhanced risk. And so I apologize for folks that are here in the east that watch my content. You had some pretty nasty storms that rolled through here. Hailers, strong winds, and you can see how deep the convection was. A couple of other important things to see in this animation. First of all, here's where the storms began to pop. So that was that storm complex we thought would start a little bit farther to the south here, but it did hit parts of South Dakota and then built down in the overnight hours. But just take a look at the dust that was blowing in Texas again, including sand off the White Sands National Park, which was blowing across parts of New Mexico and Texas. And then just one last thing, I always find this fascinating. With the winds that were ripping over the top of the Cascades, you can see, I would have loved to have been in the Columbia Basin to see this, maybe like in Yakima, right in through here, just to watch these clouds roll off the top of the mountains. Just a fascinating thing to witness here. But all said and done, we picked up quite a few severe weather reports, 138 in total, including 4 tornadoes. These reports continue to grow this morning. All 4 of the tornadoes were reported in Kansas, but you can clearly see throughout West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, even parts of Pennsylvania yesterday, we did have some pretty nasty storms that rolled through, dropping some large hail. Just showing you the last 24 hours of total accumulated precipitation. Again, a lot of streaky storm behavior in through here, and that's what we were anticipating. This is an area of great concern for me about drought development, as you know, and to see some of the storms kind of come through. Some folks got some relief and some did not. The last 24 hours is what you're looking at here. And then again, we can see the storms over in West Virginia, Virginia, and parts here of the mid-Atlantic. Storms this morning continue to go, and just looking at some live lightning data from early this morning, large complex here in the western Cornbelt stretching up into the northern plains, multiple complexes as storms continue to roll through. But I thought it'd be worthwhile just looking at a good 18-hour animation of this whole system. So the lingering front early that was dropping the storms down into parts of Virginia, you'll see them start over here in a moment. There they are. And you can see the deep convection just rolling around this large low that finally made it out here into the plains yesterday. And there are some issues right now with some of our data feeds. And I apologize. We lost satellite data yesterday. You can see at the very end of this animation, looks like we've lost some of our radars right there at the very end. And so I apologize. This just happens every once in a while. We manage several terabytes of data per day that are collected with respect to weather data. And that's probably an underestimate, even at that number. So we'll get this fixed, and we'll make sure that things are back up and running very, very smoothly again soon. I did want to show you the hail, though, just to kind of zoom in on a couple of areas. Let's start off first over here, just with some of the streaky storms went rolling through, dropping some hail. If we come back to the midsection of the country, all the way from Texas, some large hail down south, but then several of these storms putting down hail sizes between a quarter of an inch up to 2 inches diameter in hail in this region. Some places even a little bit larger than that. Okay, where are we today? Well, our all hazards weather map today kind of paints an interesting picture. Very strong winds. We still have a tornado watch early this morning here. Very, very strong winds on the back side of this, and we're going to have snow through the spine of the Rockies. Still red flag warnings out as well. Take a look how cold things are going to be here in the Willamette Valley, though. This is a very late frost in this area, or freeze in this area, where we do have freeze warnings out. We're going to have to take a look at that again in a few moments. All right, so today's severe weather outlook. Let's see if they gave me an update. I pulled this up early. No, okay. That's the latest we've got from the Storm Prediction Center. So a large area of Iowa and Missouri and Illinois today underneath both a slight and enhanced risk. Tomorrow, this translates over the Ohio River Valley. And then by the time we get into Thursday, the 18th, we're going to watch another wave. Remember the back wave on this? As it slides through, it drapes a front, right in through this area. That could deliver some severe weather through parts of the Mid-South. So 3 more days of severe weather, including today. I thought you might like to see this. This is where we currently sit on the daily counts, and we kind of compare tornadoes and hail and wind to our climatological averages. So this does not include yesterday, so this goes through the 14th. You can see we're just sitting a hair below our climatological average, but really the rest of April into May and June, this is the steepest slope on the accumulation of tornadoes. So we're right now in the middle of our tornado season, especially in the midsection of the country. Hail reports were, again, just a hair behind average. We were well above it after that big event back in March. But you can see 1151 would be normal, 992 is where we currently stand. The only category that we are above is on wind. So we are outside of the normal range here on wind, and we do expect to continue to see this year being a year where we pick up a lot of these severe weather reports, both from tornadoes and hail and also wind. Now, non-thunderstorm winds today look like this. And so this is where the low is beginning to just deepen here over parts of the western Cornbelt. On the back side, you can see where we're drawing some of this air from. This is the cold air that has now moved through the Canadian prairie, down here through the northern plains of the United States, and it's wrapping itself around the back side. There are actually multiple fronts with this system. There's one here, there's a second one there, there's a third one here, and the warm front is over there. And there's actually some occlusion to this on the back side, and the point behind that is, notice where it's all expected to meet this afternoon. Now, this would be what we would generally call the triple point of the cyclone. So the low is back here, and there's that main warm front, but there's an upper level front that's coming in through here. There's apparently, I'll have to look at this more carefully, but there might be a dry line there, and then the cold front's on the back side. So as all of this comes together, we're going to have to be aware of the risk of those severe storms. But before we look at the models, the high-res NAM model, I want to give you kind of some broader perspective on where I think this is all going. And to do that, we're going to do a quick comparison between the European Ensemble and the European Artificial Intelligence Forecasting System. This is a top-down view on the North Pole of the troughs and ridges. So again, we've talked a lot about this, but the separation between these two lows was critical for how this system was going to move across the country and where the heaviest precipitation was going to be. They're much farther apart than forecast about a week ago. So that low continues to roll up toward the Great Lakes, but it's the one behind it by the time we get into Wednesday night that's got the cold air loaded. That cold air is complements of this highly amplified pattern. We've actually got 2 of these. There's another one here over parts of the North Atlantic where there's a ridge to the north of a trough, which is here. And that's what's helping drive cooler air through parts of Europe right now as well, after what had been a very, very warm start to spring. But as we play this forward into Friday and Saturday, that's going to be the trough of cold air that drops in the potential for the frost event we've been discussing. We'll take a closer look at that as well. After this, we get a bit bunched up here in Alaska and into the Gulf of Alaska with our pattern. And that is what keeps the trough of low pressure in this region over the Hudson Bay. You see the bunching up of the jet stream here, and then the big ridge in the North Atlantic allows this to continue to live. And what that's going to do is that's going to influence both the temperature and the cadence of low pressure systems as we get into this final week of April. Now, some of the models are attempting by day 10 to keep this pattern, doing something like this. And every time we see that kind of flow in the atmosphere, there are, generally troughs off the west coast, but southwest flow coming over the mountains. This is one that just tends to signal we need to be keeping an eye on this area for the risk of strong to severe storms. Now, as we talked about the ensemble, because it's made up of so many members, when we average them, you tend to wash out individual features. And we could go through and look at all of them, but that would be looking at, in this case, 51 different ensemble members. Or in the case of Weatherbell, they may include all 101 different ensemble members. I only use 51 in the maps that I make. So what do we do with it? Well, I've been really enjoying comparing it to the artificial intelligence forecasting system, which by day 10 has several little short waves kind of skirting along the 49th parallel. See them right in through here? And that's a good indication of an active pattern. It means we're going to be seeing moisture returning to the northern plains of the United States if they come through. But we still aren't shaking these broader western troughs according to the artificial intelligence. Now, I know you just saw the pattern drop that guy right in there. And I'm going to let you know something. We're at hour 3:48. So we need to put a big question mark on this. I'm more I'm more intrigued by the persistence in the pattern of keeping this spring going with storm systems. And that's what we want to see. That we want to see the spring moisture returning. Now, just to make a comment, I'm going to show you something my good friend Ryan Maui makes. This is his graphic, which shows the European model operational run versus the GFS operational versus the artificial intelligence from the European. And they're color-coded so you can see their skill scores. And you can clearly see, if you even want to look at the statistics, that the AI is doing the best at minimizing error at predicting the jet stream pattern out 5 days. It's not that it's not without its troubles, but overall, it's doing a good job. And especially back here in January, when everything kind of fell apart, it would have been the best performer to keep with, but I didn't have access to it back then. So with all of that, let's now get into these models. And we're going to start off with the high-res NAM, which of course isn't included in that because it only goes out 60 hours, not 5 days. As we play through today, I'm going to be watching for the potential for multiple complexes of storms coming through this part of the country. Very windy around this system, but we're going to have this lead wave that could move through Iowa, Missouri, and hit the Mississippi River early afternoon. And then you're going to notice another round following and the potential for a third round coming in on the backside through this part of Iowa. So this is what happens when you wrap in what could be 3 separate fronts into this area. Upper level, a cold front on the backside, and a dry line feature. I don't know if it's truly a dry line. I didn't look at the obs this morning, but we'll keep an eye on that as it comes through. So just rocking back and forth. Maybe more importantly, look at the broad shield of rain throughout the rest of the day today that's hitting these critical areas in the northern plains. And we need every ounce of this rain that's on the backside of this right now. As it moves through, we're going to watch in the later afternoon, evening hours for severe storms to stay out ahead of this. Getting into the overnight hours tonight and tomorrow, we're going to watch for the chance for those storms to move over the Ohio Valley. And then on the backside, take note, there's snow up in parts of the Canadian Prairie. And then this coming out of parts of Wyoming, spreading into western Nebraska, delivering some rain here. This is the second wave. So remember, they were detached. Well, the first one's here. The second one is swiping in through this area. We could get another round on Wednesday night in through parts of Nebraska and Iowa. And the question will be, does this drop a front down through parts of Kansas to finally break some of the drought conditions that are here? Well, let me rephrase that, just to start to eat away at some of the drought conditions there. And are the models picking up on the potential for some stronger storms in this area, like the Storm Prediction Center said? It seems to be the case. Now, from here, let's go look at mainly the European model suite today, because the GFS I had to rerun hitting a different server this morning, and it wasn't finished by the time I recorded. 7-day European artificial intelligence system forecast. So, of course, this includes, when you look at the heavier rains in through here, the current system. This is mostly going to be some snow up north. If we take a look at the European model operational run, so this was 0Z last night, so you can see it did include last night's storms, okay? This is what I've got through Thursday into Friday. The second wave comes through. Now watch, the front stalls here, and that's what delivers the heavy rain into Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas, and this going all the way out 10 days. This is kind of the pattern we end up getting out of this. To show you the GFS, well, I'm actually not going to show it. It was yesterday's run. Let's just close that. Let's get into the operational European, watching the timing of this, though. So here's through Wednesday into Thursday. There's that second wave coming through Thursday into Friday. That's the second time we might see the third go of it on the risk of severe storms here. And then we watch that pull through the east. And then the European model is attempting to bring in on Saturday some snow with the cold air out of Wyoming into Nebraska again. This is kind of along the bottom side or the southern side of the broader trough that will be in this area. Heavy rains possible in Texas. And we got to watch out for that very carefully because this has been an area that I've seen struggle with returning moisture. The European is pulling it back into that area. And then we see that slide through the southeast. And by Monday, the 22nd, we've got this cold air exiting. And the pattern's going to open back up to a lot of warmth. And we're going to then get back into what we would call just kind of a typical spring pattern with storms firing up in the plains and rolling east with time. That's what I think we're going to be seeing here before too long. All right, I did mention some snow, so let's go have a look at it. Playing through the end of this week into the weekend. So there is the risk of bringing some of that snow out in this area. We got 2 chances for it, remember? Here's the first chance coming up on Wednesday, Thursday, right there. And then we get into the weekend, Saturday, into this area. But the heavy snow is pretty far to the north. Okay, probabilities. This is the best chance at grabbing an inch over the next 10 days, and most of this is coming from this system right now. Now, we do have the front that follows. Remember, that sneaks right into this area, but overall, I think a lot of this moisture is coming into this region now. Notice where the drier area is, and of course, in the western plains in the western U.S., and also down here in the southeast up the East Coast, we're a bit drier overall, lower probability of grabbing an inch. But if we look at the chance of staying under a half inch. Let's go back to the 0Z run and take that out to 10 days again. There we go. I'm starting just to see too much of this expanding area of dry conditions because the lows didn't couple. Montana's drier. And now we see a lot of the southeast going over a bit drier. I just want to put this in a broader context. So I kind of made this and put it in my report yesterday, but I updated it with this morning's map. And this is what I've got. Now we saw on the radar, moisture's coming through this area this morning. But the wet conditions we've seen over the last 30 days in Montana, according to the HPS, this is trending drier. We need to actually build in some heat and get rid of the moisture into the west, especially California. But I'm just continually concerned about this region and the fact that we have not been able to, fully break away into a wetter pattern. Even though the models keep calling for it, it keeps missing. I've identified a few areas that are too wet, need more opportunity to dry down, but I will make note that this moisture that came in last week into Texas, we just hit it with mid-90s and strong winds, and so a lot of this is evaporated. So we're just going to continue to keep an eye on these plains areas with respect to this pattern. Okay, week 2. All I've got in week 2 is the European this morning. The GFS ensemble needs to rerun. Again, I apologize for that. And the CPC website was down early this morning as well. So we're just going to stick with the European. But this is what it's looking at week 2. And again, we just see the pattern going back into a reset, more mild conditions building back in, and storms in the plains. That's very common this time of year. And we're going to watch those progress to the east. So kind of that same narrative. All right, I want to talk about the cold. Montana, very cold air coming in, and also here in parts of like the Willamette Valley. To do that, I want to bring up my frost map, which is what you've got here. So this is now the 7-day frost. It would appear that this might be the farthest to the south that frost makes it, according to the NDFD data. So we've kind of been talking about this for, feels like going on 2 weeks, but this is what I've got through this area east of the Rocky Mountains. Let's go have a look at those min temperatures, though, if I could spell that right. There we go. And let's see what we've got. Notice tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, how cold we're going to be here, parts of the Columbia Basin to the Willamette Valley. This is Wednesday morning's lows, getting into Thursday. Now we see Montana, a lot of low to mid 20s. I got a comment yesterday. What does it look like? Well, these are some of the numbers that I'm seeing in Montana for your temperatures. Here's a really cold morning here with lows in the low 20s. We'll probably dip into the teens in places in Montana. You can see that frost line right in through here. And as we go into Saturday morning, another one. So this is going to be, let's take it back here, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's several days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 5 days of frost event coming into parts of Montana. And as we move forward into Monday, that's when it starts to break. But it appears on Sunday, this might be the farthest extent we get of the frost, although we'll have to be careful in some of these areas that are dipping down into the low 30s that we could just have some low-lying areas hit frost. But that's on Sunday the 21st, and after that I think we make a breakaway. So here's a quick look at high temperatures. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow and Wednesday. This is Thursday. Friday, look at the warmth coming into California, desperately needed, but the cold on the eastern side of the Rockies, it does get all the way down into Texas. This is Saturday into Sunday. and going into Monday. But you've seen that beyond this time frame, the day 5 through 10, opening this up to day 10 through 15, starts to deliver a lot of mild air. And that's been a very consistent look for a while. All right, that gets you out to May 1st. I think that's where we are in the models, 15 days away. We're at May 1st. So what we need to think about now is, what does May look like? The European model, which does have what I call kind of an initialization bias, in other words, what it's got at the beginning it tends to carry. It did go wetter for a large section of the plains. And I continue to look at this and just wonder, how much is the model kind of overstating the moisture inside of that area I just drew there? And do we really begin to draw good, significant moisture back into the plains? If it does, that really pushes back on one major area that I have a lot of drought risk for. But it does appear that it's going to be a pretty active and stormy May. You saw me earlier show that there are troughs coming in from the west. There is flow that wants to come out of the southwest like this, and that's the right direction. You remember last year? Last year, what we ended up doing in late May, or actually not late May, by May 10th, was that we ended up getting a broader trough of low pressure here, and the flow was coming in from the northwest. That's what initially began the dry spell. Northwest flow in May, like we had a year ago, just drove in dry conditions into this area. So just something different to think about here. We're seeing southwest flow this May. Now from there, I do want to show you the temperatures for that same 30-day stretch. And we do notice that outside of what I still think is a bit of a snow feedback, keeping things cooler here, we're not expecting May to be a cold month compared to historical averages. And I want to show you what those historical averages look like when you select specific analog years. We did this yesterday. Here it is again. This is every analog year that had an El Nino in winter that was gone by summer, and La Nina possibly by summer. May was not overly wet on the average when you look at all these years together in this region. And if you go into the south, it was much stormier. Temperature-wise, the cooler conditions you see throughout here will likely not happen this particular May, but I do expect it to be warmer than average across the northwest going forward. Now, what we've done is we've looked at 88 and 83. That was last Friday. Yesterday, we looked at 92, 98, and 16. I want to revisit 92 for a second, and then today I want to talk about 2010. I want to revisit 92 because of some of the comments, and I can't believe I didn't even think about this the other day, but Pinatubo erupted in 91, and this is what it looked like from the USGS photography here. Massive, massive eruption, way different than the Hunga Tonga eruption of January of 2022. This one put a tremendous amount of SO2 deep into the sulfur dioxide deep into the stratosphere. So if you look at the contiguous United States from 1970 to last year, the years I want to focus in on here were let's take that off there. There we go, 1991 into 92 and 93. If you notice, now there's other reasons why you can get the temperatures over a 3-year time period to dip down. But if you notice, from when that happened, we had several years where the temperatures, were near average or cooler than average. This particular year, 1992, had a summer pattern that looks something like this. June to August, some places throughout the Midwest, upper Midwest, and plains were 4 to 6 degrees colder than average. And just so you can see what that means, I brought up the ranks for June 1st through August 31st of 1992. And for most of us that have been farming in the midsection of the country, this would be the coldest summer of our lifetimes. The colder ones are way back here before 1992. So amazing just to see what that particular summer looked like. And we looked at what was going on with El Nino yesterday, but today I'm going to shift my attention away from 1992 now and get to 2010. So a reminder on what our ocean temperatures look like right now. Okay, the year we're going to look at now is 2010. So coming out of 9 into 10, we had an El Nino that was about this strong. If you're curious where we were last time, it was here. We had 2 years of La Nina before it. This year had 3. So we're kind of finding some similarities. But this was a very, very fast drop all the way down to a strong La Nina. And here we are now. And the question is, does it do something like that or does it not? So now you know the single year we're going to compare to. This is what happened March to April of 2010. These are precipitation anomalies. Now, I'm showing you that because up to this point, we cannot say this is March to, that's just March. Is that what I did here? I'm sorry, I just plotted March. Let me open this up and do a little bit more here, and we'll come back to this. Sorry about that. I didn't click the right button. But this was March to April 2010. And you know that this doesn't look like this year in terms of the spring precipitation pattern. In other words, we've not been overly wet in these areas. We've been drier in these areas. We've been extremely wet down here and in parts of the southeast and up the east coast. So same thing with the eastern Cornbelt. This is not going to be a perfect match with what happened with the spring pattern. But what we're questioning here is, by April 15th in 2010, what did our ocean temperatures look like compared to now? So there's April 15th, 2010 compared to now. And there are a couple of things that are intriguing, like the warmth here and the broad area of colder water there. It's a little bit, oops, sorry about that. It is a little bit, warmer this year, but we had an El Nino that was fading, and there was some warmth in the main development region, quite a bit of it. Okay, that finished, so I do want to show you this. This is where we currently stand since March on our precipitation. So again, my point was to say, take a look at this. That's this year, March and early April, and this was all of March and April of 2010. So completely different look, right? Okay, back to those ocean temperatures. By the time we went from April all the way to July, La Nina was coming back in force, negative PMM, negative PDO, and very warm Atlantic. Now, this gave us a very unique view of the weather. 2010 was highly anomalous. And what was so anomalous about it was that even though we were coming off, let's see if we can zoom in here and have a closer look. We were coming off of several years of negative PDO. It was definitely deepening again in 2010. And that PDO, what I'm talking about here, is this cold water signal that you see right in here. This is part of the PDO. The PMM is down here. The PDO is more up here. It's this cold ring. Now, what was interesting about that is, where are we now? We're over here. And it appears that we're losing our PDO signal just a little bit as time goes on. Okay, so this is kind of a 5 years on, 5 years off. So here's kind of 5 years, a little bit more on, 5 years off, 5 years on, that kind of thing, okay? So as that enters part of the discussion, we want to know, can we get here with keeping this so warm? And why I'm intrigued by this is because this was a year which put a ridge of high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. Now you're saying, why? Well, that's odd. If you have such cold water here and a La Nina developing, what I would have expected is a trough of low pressure here and a massive ridge in this area. So if it was April 2010 and I was forecasting and I thought this is what the ocean temperature is going to be like, I would say expect a big dominant ridge of high pressure. That's what history would tell me. But it didn't do that. It put a trough of low pressure there. So the flow came over this and came out of the southwest. And there was a large ridge that sat somewhere here over the southeast. And that ridge was just a pump of moisture. And it just fed. And as it did so, we watched the MJO almost constantly live over here in like phase 3. It was a lot in the Indian Ocean, but a lot of phase 3. Spent the summer there. And the end result was we got this pattern. Now, pretty colorful map here, but this is the precipitation for summer in 2010. Drought mid-south, drought in the southeast, drought up the east coast, and just nonstop storms in parts of the Midwest, upper Midwest. It was stormy in even parts of Kansas and down here into Texas. Stormy in Montana. Look at the difference here. Climate reporting district to climate reporting district on the precipitation that year. But the only thing that was more consistent was the temperature pattern. It was hot. Extremely hot and dry in the southeast and mid-south, hot and stormy in the midsection of the country, cooler in the northwest. You say, why? Well, this is where the low sat, and this is where the high sat for most of summer. That is, by the way, the Bermuda High. And it was just doing this and that. And everything in the middle had tons and tons of rain. Underneath the high, it was very, very hot and dry. Underneath the low, cooler, stormier. What an interesting year 2010 was. So you might ask, well, should we give 2010 a lot of weight in our forecast? Because you've heard me say I'm concerned about drought here, or drought in the Mid-South, or drought in the Southeast based off of my historical analogs, with a lot of storms over the top and a lot of heat in the system, kind of like 2010. Well, I say that, but 2010 is a very unique outlier with respect to where its ocean temperatures were. And if 2010 is going to become a stronger analog, we've got to get these ocean temperatures to drop way off while keeping the Atlantic warm. And by the way, let's go look this up real quick. I should have brought it up. 2010 hurricane season. I just like to look at the Wikipedia pages. I think these are great. 2010's hurricane season was quite active. I mean, take a look at all of them, but a lot of them are out in the open Atlantic. In other words, that big, large high that sat here probably pushed several out to open ocean or avoided them and then kept anything that was in the Gulf away or streamed it down here into parts of Central America or maybe into Texas. Interesting just to kind of get a good summary of that. So thinking about all of this and where the temperature and precipitation pattern were, I don't want to give 2010 too much weight overall, but I'll just tell you something. Continue to watch this because there are some 2010-like features, especially if this goes over much colder in the next 60 days and La Nina comes roaring back overall. Also, we have the warm Atlantic this year. So, got to keep an eye on it. Tomorrow, we're going to hit 2020. I was talking with my colleagues Matt Reardon and Andrew Pritchard yesterday, and Matt brought up a very interesting potential analog in 2020. So we're going to discuss that one tomorrow, even though it is currently not my analog package, but we'll make a story out of it. All right, last thing to cover here really quickly is South America. As you note here, over the next 5 to 10 days, temperatures are really starting to build into parts of South America. And in terms of precipitation, we're kind of now losing that wetter signal in a more broad area, including the Tocantins, parts of Goiás, Minas Gerais, and then Mato Grosso. And then as we go forward, the models continue to suggest that late April through late May is going to be much drier in this area, which could impact the safrinha crop. It's about 4 weeks later than I thought it was going to be, but it is now starting to show up in this area, and we just have to continue to monitor. So thanks again for your attention. We'll pick up tomorrow morning. Have a good one. Thanks.